we will be recording the session for those who can't make it or for you to rewatch this later. Recordings will be available up to 30 days from when put up. The presentation will be posted on YouTube. We are pinning the video so that only the presenters will be recorded. This means you can choose to keep your video audio on or off. But if you speak, the recording will pick up your audio and not your name. You can type your questions in the chat box if you prefer, and depending on the presenter, you can privately message them as well. Please keep your audio mute whenever you are not speaking, otherwise we might pick up your background noise. We also encourage you to check out our Sugar and Spice FB group for latest updates and announcements. Regarding consent, please do not contact other participants outside of this event without their consent. You can always ask them for permission through the event or Facebook group before messaging them. We don't want instances of participants feeling violated or unsafe. For emotional support, please email us at emotionalsupport@sugarandspice.asia. Again, emotionalsupport@sugarandspice.asia. So, once again, hi everyone and good evening. Welcome to Sugar and Spice Talk Series. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Kat. I am a 4'8", 4'9" Filipina with brown skin. My hair is up in a clip because it's a little bit humid today, even despite the rains right now. And I'm wearing cat eye glasses. And in this 2-hour evening, we will introduce 3 Asian presenters: Justin Chu, Asta Kana, and Alex Liu. I'm so sorry for mispronouncing your names. So each will be speaking on a sexuality-related topic for 15 minutes each. There will be a question and answer session afterwards, and there will be a fun activity for participants during this event. At the end of the session, Martha will present a sex toy sponsored by Pink Lifestyle. And also, for this event, we would like to acknowledge our sponsor, Pink Lifestyle. Pink Lifestyle offers a wide range of lingerie, personal massage equipment, lubricants, and aromatic body oil. They carry top brands around the world: Japan, UK, and USA, each with their own distinctive culture and definition of design and innovation. Their mission is simply based on careful selection of products with the best quality at the most affordable prices. Ultimately, their aim is to bring couples closer together in the most direct manner. It is their goal to help you feel good about yourself and to draw out your inner beauty. Pink Lifestyle is a premium reseller of Lilo from Sweden, Womanizer, We Vibe, and Fun Factory from Germany, Love Sense from the USA, Tenga and Iroha from Japan, and they are also a key distributor of the sophisticated Anna Moon lingerie brand with more than 1,000 designs to choose from. So for tonight, our theme is creativity. And first, let me introduce you to our speaker number 1. Our first speaker will be talking about magical thinking and sexuality in the making of pleasure and sexual fantasies. Teasing, hot wax, and the scent of sweet creme brulee lubricant. We are being exposed in promotional materials that will tell us what is pleasure. But how often does those things work? There is an opulence of products in the sex toys industry, the market towards sexual pleasure and erotic fantasies. But does that also limit creative thinking in exploring the world of kink and intimacy? I'm actually very interested in this topic. In this session, Justin, his pronouns are he and they, shares his observation in his fieldwork in the sex toys industry and explores ways that help us explore our inner sexual creativity and rethink the relationship between what is out there in the market and the self. Like he always said, attitude is kink. So let me tell you a little bit more about Justin Chu. He is MPhil student in the University of Hong Kong with research interests including ethnography of business, Obscenity, Sex Positive, Sex Education, and Sexual Repression. His thesis project retailing sex magic, obscenity, and the Hong Kong sex toy industry studies the legal and anthropological aspect of obscenity and its application in the Hong Kong sex toy industry. He is the current faculty board postgraduate representative and chair of the Student Affair and Outreach Subcommittee of the Committee on Gender Equality and Diversity in the HKU Faculty of Arts. Apart from his academic life, Chu is known for being a community sex educator. He has hosted workshops on menstrual politics, guest lectured in universities on numerous topics, including masculinities and pornography, and guest appeared on regional public broadcasting service RTHK discussing masturbation and orgasm. Everyone, please give it for Justin Chu.
Thank you so much. Let me just ready my PowerPoint. So hi, I'm Justin. My pronoun is he and they. I'm in my black tee today with slight makeup on, with red vibrant lipstick, and I'm wearing a square glasses with a pomodoro hair. Yes, so this is how I look. So thank you for the invitation, Martha, for inviting me to talk about my research, actually. But at the same time, this research is quite close to me as a sex educator, because how I want to change how people see sex and how to be more creative, as in how they can rethink their own daily performance and daily practices. So so I'll just give my introduction, because already we Kat have introduced me, and this is my lovely picture taken by Time Out magazine. So nice. And this is my current project. So I have split. I'll be splitting today's presentation in 3 different parts. The first 2 will be relatively short in comparison to the third one, because I want to spend more time to give you a small lecture, let's just say that, on creative theories and how you can adopt this theory in your everyday life. So to begin, I'll give you a small observation of my my time being a sex toy. I was a sex toy retailer once in Hong Kong to conduct participation observation, and I will give you some of the insight that I saw when I observed people consuming sex toy, as well as how I observe how retailers retail sex toys. And I'll be theorizing it using the concept called magical thinking, which coined by my dear Professor Brian Morian, where I'll be explaining the retail of sex toy, or the aspect of Kink. It's a transformation, a magical transformation that transforms you from one thing to another, and to give you that kind of like erotic sensation. So after you think, after you know how it works, the process of magical transformation, then we can go to the discussion on how to be more creative, because you know how the magic could be happening. It's happened, right? So so without further ado, this is the first page, and the second, oh, it's jumping automatically, it's scary. So this is one of the things that most people would do, is they go to a sex toy shop and they will find different products, and then most of the time they will just jump straight to the SM product session, where they will play with different toys, they will haggle around, and then the sex toys themselves will approach them and then ask them what they need. But before that, well, I love to listen to people's shoppers when they arrive at sex toy shop. Most of the time, it's the guys who dominate the discussion, or they think that they know everything, into teaching most of the time their female partner. And there will be sessions where they interpretate the sex toy and what the sex toy do. And most of the time, it's not as accurate as they think, and they don't really have the so-called common sense on how one sex toy could be used in the body, or even they are confined. Some of them are confined they have confined themselves into thinking that sex toy can only be used in a certain way. So the second observation that I have is that or most sex toy retailers face is that when most of the customers have bought dozens of sex toys and they are very experienced with sex toys, when the next time they arrive the community erotic shop, and when they ask the retailer, oh, is there any new products in town that I can try? Given that, like, if they are extremely rich, they bought most of the things already. And this is a picture that I'm showing is the cowgirl, which is one of the most expensive sex toy single item in the market right now. If you want to spend your money in supporting the pink economy, you can always go for the unicorn version, the special edition too, which is priced as $1,495 US. So after they buy these products, even the most expensive ones, and they will come to the sex toy shop next time asking for new products. But we the sex toy retailers, always have a problem with suggesting new products because there are none. And the sex toy industry have their own limitation because there's only so many things that we can think of or give them meanings to, them. So the problem is that a lot of people, especially vanilla people who do vanilla sex, they don't usually go into kinks or BDSM or whatnot. They always outsource their creativity or sexual creativity to the sex toy shops or sex toy manufacturers. But when they consume everything available in the market, they will be lost, they'll be confused, they don't know what to do with their sex life, they think that sex it's no longer there for them. Or even like if they try one sex toy which doesn't really work for them, or the review is extremely good but the sex toy doesn't really work for them, they will start to rethink and question themselves whether they are eligible into having sexual pleasure. So sex toy is more like a double-edged sword. Sometimes it helps you open different doors, but at the same time it might confine your own creativity. So the next part is, how do we theorize this this idea or this observation? So for example, when you go to a sex toy shop, you see this particular thing, a feather stick, a stick on with a feather on. What is the resemblance of this being in a sex toy shop and a chicken feather stick, which is usually for tidying table as well as hitting naughty kids especially in Chinese culture. I didn't hit by that. Like mine, it's a bit more bougie. That was like the itchy thing for your back. That's the thing that my mom usually hit me with when I was young. But what is the difference between these two things? Essentially, they are the same, right? And you see this one, like this is a very simple blindfold that you can find anywhere. But what does it? Why is this so special when it's retail in a sex toy shop? And when there is something that is literally special, as is listed in the eye shield, blindfold. Sorry. So why is it make it so special and literally doing it? So for me, like, why do we always need to read something to use it in a certain way? The reason why I show this picture, I usually call this the straight guy underpants. So I do have a fetish on like smell and sensation, and why don't you just like blindfold me with this underwear in comparison to use a blindfold that you can find in a sex toy shop with the same use of impairing my vision to enable different senses on my body. So there is so we go into the concept of magical thinking, where we use different rituals and system and process to transform the experience. For example, when you go to a sex toy shop, the whole setting or the whole space of a sex toy shop transform your experience of seeing things. The retail of, or when you see the package of having some beautiful person with a leopard print blindfold on, that thing itself transform it into different connotations. Say, for example, BDSM and transgressiveness. And the other aspect is mimesis, where so it's more like arts imitate life in a bad way. So one of the examples that I could give is that why some people use cucumber as their sex toy. Why is it kinky, or why is it creative? Why is, say, for example, this great famous grapefruit trick is considered creative when it's just a fruit? And people, when you say that, oh, I grapefruit my man the other day, why it sounds kinky, or it sounds erotic in that sense, in comparison to, say, a masturbator? Because mimesis legitimize your consumption of sex, and the sex toy itself is helps you to legitimize your own pleasure, because it itself, for example, this is a silicone cucumber sex toy, which when you put it in hot water, it will change color. It not only by legitimacy is that in comparison to I use a cucumber to penetrate myself, it sounds better to use a sex toy to penetrate myself, right? So there is a legitimacy of enabling you when you use a sex toy to explore your body, in comparison to use something that is more creative. So the last part would be how to we release yourself or free yourself from the stigma of using alternative items in your life, or even embrace your kink identity. So we classify in creative theories, we classify creative into 3 different big categories: mini C, little c, and if you have been to Thailand, big C. Yes, so mini C is the nemesis and the enlightenment process that you have. Say, for example, the first time you masturbate, or the first time you use a sex toy, that could be seen as mini C. And little c is that the little things that you can do every day to be more creative in your sex life. And the big C is a breakthrough creativity that will change the industry. Say, for example, how Apple changed the industry by producing the first digital phone. It's like that, smartphone. And little c would be creating different apps, maybe. And mini c is the first time you use a iPhone, and that for a kid, for example, using iPhone to play with different games, like that could be mini c. So so one of the aspects of creativity is improvisation. So I try to use this research, which this author wrote on, have observed 7 elements in jazz improvisation. So I've classified them into different C's. I'll explain each of them. Some more in depth, some less. So I've classified these parts. So the first one would be mini C. So interrupting habits. One second now. So for example, if you are a person who always do missionary, then why don't you try doggy style next time? That is interrupting habits already, right? So if you are a person who never used sex toy before, or usually use those traditional vibrators for your pleasure, then why don't you try a sex toy with pleasure air, say the womanizer? And if you already own the womanizer and use it on the clitoris, which is what it's intended to use, intended for, why don't you use it on your nipples next time? So it's you can free yourself from using the product in its intended way. Some of the vibrators that one of my fellow sex educator told me, like she just delivered a child, and then she used a vibrator under her on her breast to facilitate milking, to unblock the, I don't know what is it called in English, but to unblock the milk apparently. So it works perfectly. So you can try using vibrator in different ways, and you can be creative. So as for improvisation, it's a way. One of the things that I said would be reliance on retrospective sense making, which is, say, to use different things that is readily available in your surrounding. For example, in that scene where she used a grapefruit on a phallic object, which is borrowed from Auntie and Angel, where she performed the infamous grapefruit trick. Yes, so you try to use different things around you. Everything could be a sex toy, from a bottle to a pen. It could be a sex toy if you want it to be. So literacy, there are so many words here, but the thing I want you to focus on is structure. So minimal structure doesn't mean no structure. Most of the time when people have sex, they don't really have a structure. So I want you can, before you go into the bedroom, say, for example, you can always come up with a small structure first. Say, I want to use 3 positions today, or want to use this particular sex toy. Itself already counts as something, a structure that you can bring in your sex life. But by that, like, what it needs to create structure. One, you have to continuously have negotiation with your partner, and to have dialogue, to know more about different kinks and different things you want to try. And you have to learn from your era. And this comes from learning from era and taking turns soloing. Soloing means, and supporting means that in jazz, it's like everybody have their time to shine. But in terms of sexuality and pleasure, I think from my interpretation is that everybody, you should take care of your partner's pleasure as well. Not just your pleasure, but theirs pleasure as well. Try to explore their own body. So one of the things improvisation needs, like I say, continuous negotiation is to create groove, right? So to sum up, groove is trust. To create trust between your partner and those who you engage relationship with. And I try to explain it in a form of food, which I love, and cooking. Like one of the things that I love to make is hollandaise sauce, emulsification. So to make hollandaise sauce, you need 3 things: butter, egg yolk, and vinegar. This is the exact white wine vinegar I use, really nice. So say, for example, the butter is you and the egg yolk is your partner. What is the binding agent between the two? So you need trust, as we mentioned. You need evaluation, so the learning from error part, and reciprocation. A lot of people, when buying sex toy, it's always like, especially guys, is that, oh, I want to pleasure my girlfriend. I want to do this on my girlfriend, and thus it pleasure me. But they never explore their own body enough. So whenever they talk to me, say, for example, I want to try this sex toy, I always tell the girlfriend you can perform the same thing on your partner's nipples or his furnium, which is the connecting part of the glands and the foreskin. You can try to use it, say, for the womanizer on that part too. So a lot of guys are afraid of sex toy on themselves, not so much on their partner. So because they're afraid that it will be like effeminize all of them for some reason. So reciprocation doesn't mean that you have to focus on, means reciprocation means that you can pleasure or not pleasure, or to explore your partner's sexuality at the same time, or not just focus on yourself. They have their time to shine too. Right. So Big C would be hanging out, right? Membership in communities and practice. In the Kink community, there is a thing called munch or munchies, that they will come around and sit at the table and just eat dinner or eat lunch whatsoever. So we talk about the practices, how to learn from each other's mistakes, as well as create a community that that don't make us fall into the trap of some practices that there is I mean that somebody have already have tried. So, but if you don't want, if you can't find any of these communities in town, you can always talk to your friends about it, right? Not just about building your community of Kink, but joining one, but you can build it yourself and talk it out at the same time. So for the concluding remarks, so for sex toy, I put it here. What you see is not always the truth. It can always be something else. You can that sex toy might, or sometimes some sex toy might not work for you, and that's true. But it doesn't hinder you from your way of finding finding pleasure. And sex toy, it's not a means to an end. Sex toy, it's more like a beginning of your sexual enlightenment. So it's so sexual exploration for me, there is a song performed by Mayhem Miller, the drag queen, which is a meme, right? The I meme, right? So the song, one of the lyrics said, there is a beginning, a middle, and no end. To explore your sexuality on pleasure is the same thing. There is no end to it. You can always try new different things as long as you have the mentality and the creative mind to transform different things yourself, or even you can create that kind of magical thinking yourself and don't need to outsource it to the industry. So as well as you have to master the basics, you have to know different terms and things readily available outside in different communities. And then you can try to bring these things into your daily life, and free from conventions, try to use the womanizer on different places on your body. And when you engage in kink and engage in different alternative materials, don't kink shame others. And lastly, be proud of the things that you do and play it safe. There's always ways to harm yourself. Even sex toy, if you, for example, a anal toy, if you are new to anal play and you buy a fisting tool like this, you will definitely harm yourself. Start small, start slow, buy a small butt plug first. That's what I usually recommend for people. Yes, so this is the reference, and if you want to find me, this is my Instagram and LinkedIn, you can scan it. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Justin. Does anybody have any questions for Justin? You can either message me, Martha, or put it in the chat. The red lipstick story. Justin, you're muted. Justin, you're muted.
Oh, yes. So you can hear me now, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I wore a lipstick story. Okay, I'm using Armani. I think I'm not Armani today. Where is it? Like there. Okay, I'm using Yves Saint Laurent today. wait. Like that, like a really nice one, red one, very nice. And then usually the one I use is MAC Love Weapon. Like I call this the let me just stop my filter for a split second. Like this one right here and this one, because this one I call it a blowjob lipstick. Because like if you can like if you use this lipstick, like it won't transfer. Like I usually use this lipstick on one occasion where I had to eat like really oily food, and it won't transfer either. Like this is really good. Like try Max. What's that? The liquid matte liquid lip matte lipstick collection. Really nice, really good. Yes. Oh, guide us on line the lipstick. Okay, so if you use a liquid lipstick, originally they have a what's it called, a applicator like that already. So it helps you with the lining or already. So I don't usually need to line my lips because of that. But if you are using a cream lipstick, for example, like this one, then you have to line your lips or else you have bleeding, right? So you have, say, for example, let me use a pen, for example. So if you line your lips, you have to try to outline the outer area first and try to make it bigger. If you have a smaller lip, then you can outline it bigger and then fill it in with your lipsticks. Yes.
Okay, I have a question regarding sex toys, especially for a partner that has really low self-esteem right now.
Right.
He has a low self-esteem because I think he has he can't use condoms because he seems to be allergic to it. So we're
Right.
trying to look for solutions, but he still wants to have to be intimate. But every time he tries to initiate, he starts to deflate. So, and do you have any suggestions on how we can lift up his self-esteem?
So one thing, not all condoms are made with latex. There are condoms made with, say, polyurethane, polyisoprene, and lambskin. So if you two are, oh no, you two, like your friend, yeah, shit. Like if so for lambskin, it's usually bigger than normal condoms, and they don't protect you from STD. So you have to use it with your for a monogamous partner, and it only prevent you from pregnancy. So don't use lambskin if you are with a new partner. For polyisoprene and polyurethane, say for example, for polyisoprene, you can try to use the brand Skin, and polyurethane, you can use, say, the 0.02 by Sagami. It's pretty nice too. So if these, and if it's about size, like say, for example, some of the time, if he deflates, it could be about the size of the condom as well. Try to, if both, if these male condom doesn't work, so I hate to use the word male condoms because they are external condom. We should be more gender neutral for that. He could try using internal condom, which is which is like a huge ring. And there is another ring inside. You can slip the ring inside the hole, no matter what hole it is, put it in, and then and the guy don't need to wear any condom because that is already well protected. And especially for guy that is more well endowed, I will suggest using internal condom for the partner. As for self-esteem, it's I think like he has a fear of condom because of that, because of the allergies, because of the allergy of latex. When he tried different condoms that is not made with latex, I think it will soothe his anxiety a bit. But if it's problem about penetration or what, it could be about he's afraid of having an intimate and penetrative sex, or he's afraid he's have some self-esteem issues related to his performance, then I would suggest try not to perform penetrative sex for the first few sessions. Try to focus more on, say, his pleasure on masturbation, using blowjobs and whatnot. Try to use alternative methods first. Try to boost his self-esteem is in couple play, and later on maybe you guys can engage in penetrative sex later on.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, there's one, and there's a few in the chat right now.
My research on sex toy. Okay. Okay. My research on sex toy, it's more it's on a few different things. I read most the things I currently do, it's on legal aspect, where on sex toy trade as well as retailing in Hong Kong, because for fun fact, Hong Kong's legal system actually borrows a lot from Singapore as well as New Zealand. And but if you are saying like sex toy on its own, like one of the observations that I had, which I presented, is how people outsource, they think that sex toy could cure everything. Sex toy is just like sexual medicine, where they think that buying a sex toy could save their marriage. But sometimes it's not about sex or sex life or the pleasure itself. It's about communication. That's why if you create better communication with your partner, then it will be better. So it's not always about sex toy, but knowing your body is another thing. Like there is a new report just released from Womanizer, which they interview me. They give me the data on masturbation rate. There is a new report, not report, what's it called? A research on masturbation, and they are curating a thing called Equal Masturbation Day. And they said that like women masturbate less than men, and there is a discrepancy in there. So if more people, especially if more women especially masturbate more, and by masturbation means that know your body better, then you will learn more about yourself and how you can pleasure yourself. So it'll be like that. So it's still in a very like precarious way. The next question is, how do one communicate their needs for a sex toy or to make sex life more creative for a partner who have been in a long time? That is quite tricky, because like a lot of people, especially heterosexual people, when they engage in marriage, especially, is that sex might not be the thing for them, especially in the case of Hong Kong, especially a lot of people actually have the first sex when they are in marriage, because like most of the fun fact, most of the sex therapists in Hong Kong are employed by Christian affiliated like churches to help with what's it called? Okay, to help with to help with procreation or reproduction. So it's not so much about pleasure, right? So when it leads to a problem that like sex is not much of a thing or about attraction, but it's about reproduction. So of course, like we have to driven back to the thing to the point that we have to learn that people learn that like sex itself is pleasurable and everybody are entitled to have pleasure. And if you're saying in a long-term relationship, of course, one of the solutions would be open relationship, but it's not for everybody, right? Not polyamorous or even polyamory, open relationship. You need a lot of communication and trust issue to build up a level of trust in order to curate that. So as for the other part, of course, like you can, when one part of the person is not as into, say, for example, penetrative sex, then we should free ourselves from the aspect of sex is just penetration. Try to explore, especially for if in a hetero sexual relationship, try to explore your guy's body as well. The guy's body is quite interesting too, not just about the women's body. And then later on, we might try to engage in different things that it will lead to nowhere, somewhere else. So try different things first. If it doesn't work, and you can actually live with it. So by living with it is that you should embrace yourself, as in you just love that person for that person's sake. You don't really need to so-called spice up your life, right? So it's all about like communication between partners, whether one party needs this or doesn't need that. It's all come down to the context. As friends, or one could share some brand names on the latest one. Oh yes, Right. Okay. Yeah. So as for female condom, I think I'll send it here later when the next speaker starts. There is a few female condoms that are made with non-latex material. I do always recommend try to use non-latex materials, say polyisoprene, say skin, because like skin, the Chinese translation, it's really nice. It's artificial latex. 人工树脂, 人工树脂, right? So it have the property of of latex, the elasticity of it. So you could try skin if it's possible. Wait, no. Oh, in that case, then if Singapore doesn't sell female condom, then try to import it. Say you can buy it on what's it called, like Amazon, or some of the sex toy shop in Hong Kong do international shipping too, but it's a bit expensive. So try to open the market of female condoms, because especially for guys that are more well-endowed, where they don't know, when they say that, oh, not all condom fits me, no condom fits me in the market, I'll usually say shut the F up and then use a female condom. Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Because if we don't have any more questions, I think we can proceed to our next speaker. Okay, thank you, Justin. So for our next speaker, they will be talking about that steamy scene, the making of. The awkward, technical, beautiful truth about shooting scenes of intimacy on screen. In this talk, we will address the misnomers around scenes of intimacy on screen. They will also talk about best practices and safety standards that are ideal to navigate scenes of intimacy, the creativity behind the choreography of scenes involving intimacy, and obstacles that one has to work with. They will also address the maker's gaze and how stories are told, and what can urge creators to strive for more equitable, inclusive, and culturally open narratives. So our speaker for tonight is Asafa Khanna. Born and raised in India, Asara, she or her, has always had a great passion for cinema. She graduated from the University of York in the year 2016 with a Bachelor of Science, honorable in film and television production. At the age of 26, she has already worked on many different formats of content in the UK and India. She has been an assistant director on over half a dozen feature films in India, including the very successful and national award-winning Adhanton Bad Sri Ram Raghavan. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. And currently, she is working as DA to Shakun Batra's next feature film set to release on 2021 this year. She has worked with international studios like Viacom 18, Netflix, RSVP, and Dharma Productions. She hopes to soon finish writing her own feature film and maybe direct one day in the very near future. Her journey to become India's first certified IC started in the year 2020 while she was designing a workshop for the actors on a feature film that has intimacy. On realizing that the Indian market didn't have a trained expert in the field of intimacy coordination, she jumped at the opportunity to train under the IPA in order to equip herself to bring about a revolution in the standards of safety sets in India. She has then gone on to become the founder of India's first intimacy professionals network called the Intimacy Collective. And with the help and support of the collective, she hopes to share the much needed knowledge and expertise of intimacy coordination across the different Indian film and television platforms. Everybody, please welcome Asata Khanna.
Hello, hi, I'm Astha Khanna for pronunciations. I'm a little bit brown. My hair is open, well, almost open. I do not wear any glasses. I am wearing black today. This description is for any visually impaired people that may be listening in. I would like to thank Justin for setting the bar so high for the talk today. I don't know how I'm going to be able to match that, Justin. But thank you so much. That was extremely informative. So I am India's first intimacy coordinator. And what does that mean? It's a slightly broader spectrum of things, but I thought I'll kind of start with who I am and what I do. So I'm basically the product of an accidental birth lottery because I've been dealt a great hand when it comes to family support structure in form of like close friends. They facilitated a life for me that has given me the courage to make strong decisions that are against the current and to take up new challenges. Intimacy for me has always intimacy for me was the most bizarre but most amazing accident in my life. I came to know of the job role when I was reading an article that was shared to me while I was assisting on a feature film in India. And while reading the article, I came to the realization that it marries two causes that I feel extremely strongly for, and three subjects that happen to be the pillar of the work that I do I mean, they're subjects of the human experience that are the most fascinating to me. I'm going to talk about the three subjects first. I'll tell you about the latter. So the three subjects are psychology, which is how the mind works, what that means for the sense of self, relationships, and the mind that builds itself and everything else around it. The second subject is law, which is the structure of society's moral compass, if you look at it like that. It's the drawn boundaries around any subject that has any form of contention attached to it. And film, which is the human invention that allows for creating and capturing and reviewing a life experience. It is a mirror or a reflection of society and also a door that is open to aspiration. These three subjects are the most influential in the work that I am able to do today. They're very uniquely weaved into the two causes that have been very personally impactful in my career to a very large extent. The empathy and the understanding of the world that we know today and what we know that the world needs today. These two causes were the Me Too movement, and the cause for allyship towards the LGBTQIA plus community. The fact that in India, the importance of the LGBTQIA plus community and the struggle for them to find relevance in the legal system of India has taken a really long period of time, and only so began to happen in the year 2017, 2018, until before which identifying as somebody from the LGBTQIA plus community was considered illegal. And the Me Too movement happened in 2018. It took steam in 2017 and 18. It was around the time that I kind of got to put my voice to a cause that was impacting my industry and the one that I was working in directly. Being somebody who is a survivor from the Me Too movement, from sexual harassment in the workplace, I also did find myself in a very precarious position when I was kind of battling, trying to explain to the external world around me that my industry was a safe place for people to come to work in. And I was protecting my own workplace and kind of defending it. At the same time, I was struggling to kind of try and find a solution around how do you make a set or a place like our film industry a more safe space for people to kind of work in. When I landed on that epiphany, I decided to do something about it. And like these three subjects and the two causes that I felt so much for gave me this undying urge to take up and pursue this generally unheard of job role, which is the job role of an intimacy coordinator. What followed for me was a series of gears that kind of fell in place and were able, that enabled me to kind of take on an entirely new profession, the challenge to build a whole other market in an industry. It's not about breaking into a new market for me. It has been about building the market from scratch. And that challenge has been one that keeps me awake at night all the time. But let me talk a little bit about why we are having to face these challenges. So historically, if I am to talk about it, masculinity that has come down generations and has dominated the worldview. I mean, as what we call as patriarchy. Masculinity is associated with the idea of strength and is opposed to sensitivity. There is this overarching idea that a man is supposed to be aggressive with no space for emotions, or extending so far as to like a gendered classification of job roles. The patriarchal idea that the purpose of a woman's life is to serve the man, and while we live in the binary, the man is to be served by the woman with love and care, and very conveniently it shifts the burden of emotionality and affection onto the women, leaving the men to be portrayed as the lumberjack or the politician, or all positions of physical strength and power, like political, intellectual, physical, emotional power. The entire idea of this is all consuming for men themselves, because it saves no space for weakness. And therefore there's a portrayal of them even when reproducing their intellectual power, entailing visualizing or writing narratives that reinforce this patriarchy. That is what we in a sense call the male gaze, which is the fact that everything that we look at in the world today is from the eyes of the man, is from the eyes of the lawmakers, is from the eyes of the political leaders that are mostly heterosexual, cisgendered heterosexual males. The overarching factor of this extends to intimacy and that expression of desire, the desire of the emotionally vulnerable, the more sensitive and delicate sort of species, which then becomes the woman. These ideas have entirely kind of suppressed and, for the lack of a better word, not given value to the LGBTQIA plus community or the entire spectrum between the binary. And anything that does not kind of fit in that idea of patriarchy was systematically repressed through the ages, and their narratives were erased. So to kind of bring in a space wherein one is not viewing everything from the male gaze, there comes in the body of the female gaze or the feminist gaze, which is a more equitable gaze. The fact that when we shoot a particular scene, one is to look at it from the perspective of a power balance in terms of the power dynamic within the scene. And I mean, to speak to that female gaze and that feminist gaze, there is a beautiful talk that Joey Soloway spoke about, which I will link later on for everyone to go ahead and have a look at. I want to kind of also bring about, I want to kind of also mention what it means for sex and sexuality to be represented on screen in Asia. In Asia, in India, in the different countries in Asia. Specific to India, we've been a culture that has spoken about sexuality through murals, through temples, through architecture. There's a Sanskrit book called the Kama Sutra, which basically focuses on sexuality, eroticism, emotional fulfillment. And we've kind of had, I mean, the South Asian culture has been rich in music, art, literature, architecture, but there still remains a stigma that has surrounded sex and sexuality. Stemming from a tradition-bound conservative culture, conversations on sex and sexuality within the South Asian communities and the Asian communities at large have long been marked by shame, blame, and at its best, neglect. Experiencing sex and discovering one's sexuality is often a crucial part of growing up. The experience is very, very different for South Asians as to what it would be to anybody in the West or, the Western cultures. Because the concept of communicating about anything around sex, sexuality, or exploring anything to do with one's identity when it comes to gender and sexuality has been riddled by shame and blame, and to a very great extent has been completely discounted of its own value. So women have often been told to cover up, stay inside, act like they don't want attention if they're trying to if they're trying to communicate their sexuality, whether it is any child that wants to explore identifying and representing their gender and sexuality through means of clothing or attire, it has often been kind of suppressed. This is something that we show a lot when we discuss sex and sexuality within the platform of intimacy and intimacy choreography on screen. Having said all of this, I want to kind of discuss what urges a creator to strive for a more equitable, inclusive, culturally open narrative, one that is coming from a feminist gaze, one that is coming from a space of an equitable, more inclusive, more open space. I feel like it's very important for consumers and audiences to expect this out of the makers, to shun content and films that come from a place that are representing gender and sexuality in a titillating manner, or in a manner that is not respectful. It's very important to also recognize and understand diversity and identities and be cognizant of appropriation when one is creating scenes and simulating scenarios within a story. So for those reasons, I always urge creators to make sure that they try to cast people from within the community when they're trying to represent people from within the community. That being just one example, there are a lot of other different ways in which this can be achieved. Having consultants and research teams or intimacy professionals there on board to kind of make sure that the right knowledge is reaching the creators so that they are able to incorporate that knowledge and to create more realistic representations on screen. That's what brings me to kind of what the work role of an intimacy professional in its umbrella is. Intimacy choreography is something that is a very important aspect of an intimacy coordinator's job role. The world we live in today has voices, and intimacy is experienced by everyone as opposed to, just the male narrative. A scene of intimacy is a direct representation of the character's sexuality that shapes characters in their intimate moments with added vulnerability and sensitivity. And so for one to kind of choreograph a scene of intimacy creatively, one needs to keep all of those aspects in mind. Taking cognizance of the actor's consent and delivering an aesthetically pleasing, much real depiction that is true to character is a very important part of an intimacy coordinator's job role. So what are scenes of intimacy? What have I been talking about all along? Scenes of intimacy are scenes with intimate interactions that involve interactions with self and with other people, with or without nudity. These scenes include, but they're not limited to, scenes of nudity, simulated sex, touching, physical examinations, groping over clothing, dry humping, flirtation, simulated sexual harassment or violence, childbirth, pregnancy-related content, hypersexualization of body parts, what we call item songs in India, or what are called, just like, what would be a representation of, say, a stripper in a nightclub, or a drag queen in a drag show. Portrayals of hypersexualization of any kind of characters, intimacy, any kind of intimacy between minors, and familial relationships of minors and family. All of these kind of become very important to consider when we're considering a scene of intimacy. Intimacy on screen is really not as simple as it looks. I mean, there's awkward, sensitive environment where people are constantly feeling vulnerable and insecure of their bodies. If it's not provided with adequate support and safety, it can become extremely traumatizing. Intimacy is a central part of the human experience and a popular theme to explore and reflect upon by storytellers. So it's something that comes in and goes and has gone through in time, where storytellers have decided to use intimacy as a tool to kind of push forward their narrative. Nonetheless, working in intimacy can create or evoke physical, mental, emotional harm. That's where an IC kind of comes in. An intimacy choreographer, an intimacy coordinator, an IC is like a choreographer or like a stunt director. They're supposed to be there to kind of handhold the performers while also making sure that the director's vision is realized. So they're there to support the performers through scenes of intimacy, in emotional support or any kind of other support where they require, whenever they're called upon to do so. It is about, kind of making sure that the performers feel supported, they feel safeguarded from potential harassment or any kind of distress. The IC is hired by a production to kind of support the director's vision and to also safeguard the production to make sure that no legal hassles happen on a later date. Conversations around consent and boundary are clear and concise. And IC secures the production from any kind of unforeseen delays or lawsuits. The idea to have an IC on set is also to kind of create an equitable work environment where the crew feels safe when they're shooting any form of intimacy on set. And for those reasons, we like to say that, we, as in the collective, like to say intimacy coordination is about trying to create a brave space on film sets that entails advocating and ensuring consent conversations throughout the process. Consent simply means to give permission. And the collective that I've founded, which is the Intimacy Collective in India, borrows its inspiration from the pillars of consent of Planned Parenthood. There's an acronym called FRIES, which is one that I always like to discuss. FRIES is basically consent is FRIES. It's freely given, it's reversible, it's informed, it's enthusiastic or empowered, and it's specific. What does that exactly mean? These are the different 5 pillars of consent, and how can you give consent to something unless and until all of those 5 pillars have been kind of ticked off. So the idea of consent is based on boundaries. These function as limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for others to behave around them. performers cannot be considered as objects. I have a colleague, her name is Neha Vyas, and she very often uses this this statement. She says that performers are not objects, they're instruments. They have their own traumas and they have their own boundaries, and they differ from person to person, and they're culturally dependent. And IC recognizes those boundaries, and often the performers, and IC recognizes those boundaries of the performers, and they often seek their consent and functions according to, what serves the production. It is like a road map or a body map that an IC draws around the performers in order to navigate that scene of intimacy. When we say we're talking about performers, we're talking about production. We have to also speak about what it means to be supportive to the crew on set. We always say that there is no hierarchy to respect. So to make sure that everybody who is standing there in that room is feeling comfortable, is feeling not triggered by the scene that we're shooting, is aware of everything and have consented to be there in that room, is also an important kind of back end aspect of an intimacy coordinator's role. So the idea is that the production company must, kind of comply with relevant laws of the region to kind of bring the film to life. They have to make sure that guidelines and protocols around intimacy and the laws around labor have been upheld through that process. And thus, when working on scenes of intimacy, we must understand that performers are exposed to a risk of intimidation, body shaming, gender-based derision, any kind of physical damage, assault, sexual assault. And therefore, that risk assessment is a very important part of the producer's job role. So basically, how are these scenes shot? Understanding of detailed outline of these scenes, even when you're at a casting stage, conversations with director, making sure that scenes have been completely choreographed beat by beat, making sure that you're mapping all of the sex scenes and the intimacy scenes together with the performers, so the performers are kept involved and informed at all times. Not allowing improv on set, which happens to be something that directors really like to do. They like to leave things for the very end so that they can capture magic. So to try and reduce that capturing of magic as much as possible. There's always certain kinds of there's misnomers around scenes of intimacy in the audiences. Are these people naked? Are they actually having sex? Are they kissing really? Do they eventually end up in a situation where one has an erection? These are all questions that a lot of the viewers end up having, like, oh my God, how are they naked and walking around so many people? How do they do this? How do they shoot that? Are actors naked? No, they're not. They've been made to wear modesty garments. They feel comfortable. They've been given the required support when it comes to barriers being, as the word suggests, physical barriers between two performers and their genitalia. And are they naked always? No, not necessarily. It could be a body double, it could be CGI. There's a lot of kind of different ways in which one can imply nudity on screen. I feel like there's a lot of questions around how we shoot scenes of intimacy, but I think what it really does boil down to eventually is the fact that, much like any other scene in cinema that is being shot, there is a large amount of detailed planning that goes into it. There is a lot of effort that goes into it from a lot of different departments that kind of come together to make a scene what it looks like on screen. And with the help of an intimacy professional, one can always make sure that everybody on that set or scene is feeling brave, is feeling comfortable, is proud of the product that has been eventually created. So I would like to kind of conclude by sharing with you that this profession and what I've gotten into is truly been the most valuable, life-changing experience for me. It has opened me up personally far more as a person than I was. I find myself a lot more in attunement with my own feelings, with my wants, my needs, to be able to bring that work to, to be able to bring that attitude to work, it requires for me to constantly work on myself as a person, to be able to communicate better in my own relationships, to be able to take cognizance of when I'm feeling triggered, working on that, communicating that with people, addressing issues that come to me in my own personal life. So, even with friends, with family, and, listening more, recognizing the needs of the people that are around me, and allowing for a space, a more brave space, a more safe space for people to come and communicate and to be able to build that trust with them. It is honestly one of the most deeply satisfying job roles that I have ever come across. And I truly urge everyone whoever wishes to become an intimacy coordinator to kind of take that on in their life. It was truly life-changing. And I believe, that the crux of your existence means something enough to bring about that change when what you've chosen as your profession ends up becoming your calling. So with that, I would like to kind of conclude my talk today, and I'd like to open up the floor to a few questions.
Thank you for that. Actually, I do have a question for you, since you mentioned in your bio that you would like to direct and write your own. So if you had the opportunity to have your dream film, what would you like to write? How would you write it? And how would you like it to be directed?
Wow. How would I like to write it? For firsts, I would like a long holiday to be able to go to a place where I'm able to truly write without the outside noise of the world that I live in. But I would love to write, and I have been writing, and I can tell you a little bit about it, only a little bit. It's a story. It's a love story, drama between two people in the 70s, navigating the Indian, like with the overarching theme of the Indian politics around the 70s. But that's a story which is kind of inspired from my grandparents. So that is the story I am writing, and I would one day truly like to direct it. It has very little to do with actual on-screen intimacy, but it has a lot to do with navigating relationships and communicating, and is very nuanced in the cultural setting of India in the 70s. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to kind of working towards.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any more questions or encouragement for Asata? Because as a fellow writer, I'm actually I'm an erotica poetry poet, and also a young adult writer, so I can relate with you in terms of your passion. So Martha has a
I would
question.
love to read. I would love to read some of your erotic poetry. Please send it along.
Okay. Martha has a question. Want to know how you would deal with sexual violence, assault, violation during filming?
Sure. So much like every other scene, we kind of break the scene down and try and figure out how much of sexual assault or violence is required to be showcased on screen for it to be implied and for the audience to get the effect that the director is working towards. Once that breakdown is in place, I usually like to have a workshop period with my performers in order to kind of run them through everything and to make sure that I'm able to do some kind of trust building exercises between them, because it's very important for both the performers or all of the performers to have a lot of faith and trust in each other, especially in terms of, when they're shooting scenes of sexual violence. Sexual violence scenes are always extremely triggering. They're triggering to the crew, they're triggering to the people that are making them, and of course they have the potential to be extremely harmful to the performers. So I always like to tell the performers to stay away from trying that concept of method acting or needing to go to a place in their lives and to relive a certain experience in order to bring it to the table for sexual assault specifically. I try to kind of tell them to steer clear of that. And also to work with them in a place of their characters as opposed to them as people. So I kind of do something wherein I tell them to dissociate from themselves as a person with the help of like a check-in, check-out kind of process, when when you tap in your someone and your character, and then when you're done with the rehearsal and when you're done with going through the beats of everything, then you can tap out and you're a different person, and you're able to kind of compartmentalize your experience through that process. It's also extremely important to do check-ins, and I do very many of them during sexual assault scenes, because they are ideally, they are the most challenging scenes to kind of shoot. So I do a lot of check-ins. I make sure they get safe words. So much like, in the case of BDSM, or when you're trying anything very creatively in your own personal lives, partners use safe words, right? We try and use safe words on set so that scene partners can tell each other, okay, this means I need a checkout time, I need 5 minutes. They're able to ask for a pause whenever they need to. And the narrative of how that is going to be shot, a lot of that power is given to the performers for those scenes. Of course, when you're working with the director understands the sensitivity of that, and allows for the actors in those situations to call for cut if they feel like they need to. So there are a lot of different kinds of protocols around around shooting scenes of any kind of sexual violence. But I think the most I think the overarching theme of it is to make sure that the performers feel like they're completely in control of their environment when they're putting themselves in a situation that involves any kind of sexual violence. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, there's another one. What happens if it has happened in a film you're working on sexual violence, assault, violation of the cast?
What happens if it has happened in a film you're working on? As in, if some kind of violation has happened?
I think that's what you meant.
If some kind of violation happens on a set, I've touchwood been very, very lucky in this regard, and have been able to kind of navigate situations before they reach a point of any kind of real damage having been caused. But I mean, of course, with intimacy coordinators are trained in bystander intervention. So if I can see something going wrong, I know exactly how to kind of deal with it. If somebody is feeling triggered at any point of time, I have training in mental health first aid. So I would be able to kind of help them navigate that trigger, and how to kind of deal with people in a situation when they are feeling triggered is very dependent on who they are as people. So it is extremely subjective. But if a scene like that happens and it gets captured on camera, for instance, then there is evidence to speak to. But however, there's sometimes that it doesn't get captured on camera, and then it becomes a he said, she said kind of scenario, and that's when you kind of take to a point of making sure that that kind of situation is escalated to the authorities. When somebody is able to kind of talk to having felt uncomfortable in any kind of scenario, it is important that everybody who is around them testifies to that. And so, you know, one would escalate it, say, to the higher authorities, which is the production in this case, or to you know, like your heads of production, to the studio that has anti-harassment policies and sexual harassment prevention committees. I think with us today we have our collective's expert on prevention of sexual harassment and redressal actually with us today in the talk, Asya, and she always talks about how it's extremely important to give sensitivity training in advance to all of the crew and make sure that they are in attunement with their surrounding and are aware of anything if it's happening and can flag it. So if it does happen, you're not just my eyes, there are a lot of other eyes on set kind of making sure that everything is happening as per plan. And anything that is not happening as per plan can get flagged then. So you try to prevent it as much as possible. But if in the case that it does not, that prevention does not work, then to support the performer becomes extremely important, and to make sure that they go and get the adequate help from a psychologist if they need it, or if they need adequate help in terms of legal, to make sure that they kind of you know, get that help. The idea is to kind of support that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So for tonight, our last speaker for tonight, we are going to, wait, let me unpin first. Okay. So for our last speaker for tonight, we have, their topic is From Catholic to Cocksucker, Letting Go of Shame. Like many American youth in the 90s, Alex's Catholic upbringing taught him that same-sex relationships were shameful. I understand that so much. His school showed him all too graphic images of people with untreated HIV/AIDS to keep him from having sex. Because he knew he was gay, Alex suppressed his sexuality. Convinced that sex would destroy him, Alex went down a path of shame and isolation that eventually turned to suicide. But for the past 6 years, Alex has worked on a sex education documentary, A Sexplanation. In it, he takes audiences on a playful, heartfelt journey from his shame-filled past to a happier, healthier future. Hear what he's learned by turning the camera on himself, and how he's turned his personal pursuit of shame-free pleasure into a call for comprehensive sex education for everyone. So director Alex Liu's work explores taboo topics like sex and drugs in order to broaden our understanding of science, morality, and how to negotiate a meaningful life. He's developed two YouTube channels focused on sex and drug education, totaling over 5 million views. After studying molecular toxicology at UC Berkeley and science, health, and environmental reporting at New York University, he produced video, radio, and print content for Nova Science Now, CNN Health, and San Francisco NPR station KQED. Everybody, Alex Liu.
Hi everyone. Excuse me.
Hello.
So I have kind of golden brown skin. I have black hair that's shaved really tight to like a buzz cut. I have a little stubble because I haven't shaved in a little bit. And I'm wearing a t-shirt with kind of a Japanese wave pattern, blue and white t-shirt. Great. All right, it's great hearing from everyone. Thanks for the introduction. A little bit more about myself. I'm a Chinese American who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up Catholic, but I'm a steadfast atheist now. A big reason I am is because I came out as gay in 2001, and the church made me feel like that made me a really bad person. Now, if you've decided to come to these talks, you probably don't need me telling you how sexual shame is unhealthy. But it's one thing to know intellectually that sexual shame is bad for you. It's much more difficult to figure out how to actually get rid of that shame. And I'm not sure I have the answer, but I am a science and health reporter. So if I don't know the answer to a question, I make a documentary asking the smartest people I can find to help me think through a problem. And while shooting my latest documentary about sexual shame, I realized that I didn't really even know what sex is. Now, if I were to ask you to define sex, what would you say? Would you say it has to do with holes, fluids, and genitals? Intercourse? Orgasm? Do you need to be naked for sex? Do you even need to be in the same room as your partners? Is phone sex sex? What about sexting? It's certainly sexual, right? So then, what makes it sex? It took me over 2 decades to get an answer that starts to make sense. So 20 years ago was my last year of secondary school. It was the worst year of my life. I was suicidal, of making plans to end my life because I just couldn't see how my sexual desires could ever make me happy. Because at 17, the only times I had heard any authority figure talk about men having sex with men, it had to do with shame, suffering, and sadness. On the news and in the classroom, I only heard about gay sex when it came to HIV/AIDS. Politicians and priests compared gay sex to sex with animals and children. Queer men were regularly ridiculed, beaten, and killed, and people did very little to stop them. And this terrified not just me, but also my classmates. I know this because when I finally found the courage to tell a friend I was in love with him, he told me he'd rather die alone than be in a relationship with a man. Luckily, I have some amazing parents who got me the therapy I needed. By my 20s, I was openly gay, marching in pride parades all around the country. I used to pray that I would turn straight, but now I wouldn't trade being queer for anything. But even though I have come out and I was still proud of my queer identity, I still had these really strong feelings of shame and anxiety when it came to actually having sex. Sex didn't feel like I thought it should. I often felt disconnected from my body. I didn't feel pleasure a lot of the time, and it left me feeling confused. And when I started finally finding the courage to talk about these feelings, it became really clear I wasn't alone. And it wasn't just my gay friends, it was all my friends. We all had these doubts and fears that we didn't know how to deal with. So I turned to my reporting instincts and just started digging into the scientific research. And because I was lucky enough to be living in San Francisco at the time, I had access to world-class sex researchers and educators who introduced me to a wide range of sexual cultures. I spoke with different kink communities and queer communities, polyamorous people who maintain sexual relationships with multiple people of multiple genders, asexual people who had no interest in intercourse, but still wanted romantic relationships. I saw there really were an infinite number of ways to be sexual. As long as there were consenting adults, there was no right way. Learning about all these different ways of being sexual started to release tons of shame. My definition of sex was starting to shift. If this research was helping me, I figured it might be able to help other people. So I started traveling the United States and Canada with a documentary film crew and trying to find the best sex researchers and educators and hearing how they defined sex. One of the most surprising interviews I did was with Father Donal Godfrey, a Catholic priest. I was there to confront him about the damage the Catholic Church did to me and my family, how much pain and anguish they caused when they told me that gay sex was sinful and I was going to hell. Upon hearing this, Father Godfrey apologized. He sat and listened. And then we had a conversation that changed how I see the world entirely. Many Christians don't understand Jesus as a sexual being, he told me, but he was human. I asked him to define what he meant by sexual being. Sexuality is what drives us out to other people. It's the spark, the energy. Everything we do is sexual. There's no part of us that isn't sexual. He went on. So you shouldn't be scared of sex and sexuality. It's part of who we are, an intrinsic part of who we are. Ultimately, my understanding of the church's message is to make us more human and more fully alive. If it doesn't do that, what good is it? So the conversation we were having was sexual? Yes, he said. Every encounter is sexual. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around that idea that every encounter is sexual. Because it would mean there's no way you can ever truly hide your sexuality, that in every interaction, there is a sexual dimension. It's thinking about sex not as intercourse, but more as pleasurable human connections of all kinds. A pat on the shoulder, telling someone they look good that day, listening to a loved one's fears, all interactions where we establish intimacy, no matter how small. Yes, intercourse is sex, but it's only one part of a playground we call sex. With this new definition of sex, I think much more about establishing strong human connections than I do about strong orgasms. I think more about the beauty of vulnerability than about the beauty of my body. I think about how lucky I am to have a brain built for such pleasures and how wonderful it is to share with others. My interview with Father Godfrey, along with many others, became my sex education documentary, A Sexplanation. In it, I devote a large portion of the film making an argument that if we want kids to stop being ashamed about sex, we need to be talking about sex with them as early as possible. But not talking to them about the scary parts of sex, but about the amazing parts of sex. Yes, they need to know about the biology, but what they really need to know is about the humanity. Now, what if we told kids sex isn't as much about what parts you put in what holes, is much more about how we connect with each other as human beings, how we play with each other. That an intensely connected conversation, fully clothed and with no physical contact, might make you feel more intimate, more alive, more sexual than penetration. That the only thing that's normal about sex is that we're all different, and the desire to know people and be known, to see people and be seen, is what makes us sexual beings. And where's the shame in that? Now, at this point, you might be saying to yourself, well, it's well and good preventing sexual shame in children, but what about me? How do I get rid of my deep-seated sexual shame? If you're like me, you might always live with that shame. It's just a part of who you are. But maybe you can do what I do now when I feel sexual shame. I think about that expansive definition of sex. I think about how beautiful it is to want to connect with others in however way you want to connect. I think about how being sexual just means you're being fully human. So you have two choices. You can keep running away from something that's impossible to outrun. You can keep trying to hide from something that's impossible to hide. Or you can honor it. I think I'm ready, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
Wow, that is a really good talk, Alex. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, the world needs more people like you. So does anybody have any question for Alex? Feel free to type in your questions in the chat below, or speak up. Because I really relate with your experience because I came from a Catholic school here in the Philippines, and they really shame you really hard. And I can really relate with your experiences too, especially that it took me how many years to accept that I'm probably not as bi as I think, nor was I lesbian, but more of a pansexual type of person. And I really think that sexuality and intimacy is a journey. Just
Yes.
because you think
Always changing, always
always
changing.
changing. Just when you
just
think
like-
that you're like this, in the next few years, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, I think it's really about being open to connection, right? I think
Yes.
I think identities and sexual orientations, they're useful and they're helpful in many ways in terms of finding community, finding dates, even just basic dates, right? But I think more and more that these kind of strict definitions are kind of imposing joints on a phenomenon that doesn't really exist. It's kind of an easy way humans like to generalize because it's just easier in many ways to get through life that way. And that's totally fine. But I think individually, personally, when you think about sex and sexuality, just know that you really don't have any limits other than the ones you put on yourself. And that your brain and body and spirit really is open to connections of many types. And the more we're open to that, just kind of the more sexual we can be and the less shame we'll probably have.
Okay. I'd like to ask in terms of creative person, or let's talk about film. Is there a difference between pandering and being authentically authentic in terms of representation on sexuality and then gender on sexuality really in the media right now?
I think completely. I think I've seen movies now that try to cram in gender issues, trans issues, and they don't feel organic to the character. They feel like they're proselytizing, they're trying to preach, they're trying to virtue signal. I think some of the best work I've seen that make a person's identity not central to their character, not central to the plot, not central to the movie, but just a one facet of who they are, and develop them as an actual human, flawed, three-dimensional character. And I think to me, that is actual representation, because I don't need a gay character to be a saint. I want a gay character to be a human. And the more we can kind of think in those terms, I think the better it will be for everyone to see how they themselves are queer or a woman or man, all these things that we think about in very strict binary senses that we contain multitudes. And that's what I think media can really do, and help people see other parts of other people inside themselves.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alex. So now I'm going to give the meeting over to Dr. Martha for our sex toy discussion. Okay, take it away, Martha.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying with us all to the end. So our second speaker, she had to go because of an emergency, but thank you everybody for staying. So every session, we have a fun activity, and we also have a sex toy introduction. We don't want to overwhelm people by introducing too many products. So today we'll just introduce one. But before that, I'm going to pause the video, and then we will do a short fun activity. I'm not sure how fun it is. It will be less than maybe 5 minutes, this fun activity. But I'm going to ask all of you to turn on your video. Okay, so I'm going to stop the record. So we are back. Okay, we're back. So today we want to talk about Womanizer Eco. And Womanizer is the world's first air pressure technology. It does a suction on the clit. So this particular one is Womanizer Premium, and it's made of medical grade silicone. So the difference with the premium, because they have the classic, which is made of plastic, and the premium is made of high grade silicone. So what's the difference with the new Eco, besides the fact that it's pink and it's super beautiful? It comes in this box, which is completely recyclable. And just like any toy that you get, usually you are just so in love with the packaging, the green of it, the cotton bag. Okay, so the difference is that even though they have very similar features and they look very similar, the material is different. This is a plastic that can be recyclable. This part is, however, high-grade silicone, and the body can actually be opened. So what is unique about this is you can open up the body like this, and then it took me a while to figure out how to open it quickly. Essentially, you have to run it through the whole body. So yeah, it will open up, and the battery inside is actually can be changed. So what happens is it still uses magnetic charging, but after about 300 times, the battery will start to spoil, you know, just like anything. And so what happens is this battery can be replaced, whereas for the premium one, you can't. That's it. After 300 times or so, the battery will probably just die. So it is it's a magnetic charging. It does come with a nozzle, and even the cable is different from the usual one, and the charging is here. So it comes with 12 intensities, LED indicator, and it's recyclable, splash proof, exchangeable battery, and with every purchase, a tree will be planted in your honor. So that is the unique thing about this particular product. That's why they are calling it a Womanizer Eco. They have made some effort to make sure that this product can stay with you for a very, very, very long time. And I think it's really worth it for those people who have already heard of Womanizer, who want to do something good for the environment, and may have tried their smaller version, which is the Starlet. So yeah, the way you would use it is you just press the plus or minus. You press the plus, and then it will start to create a suction over the body. Not sure if you guys can hear it. Yeah. So you just press plus minus to move it around. So essentially, this is Womanizer Eco, and it's world famous. So I'm just giving it like a little shout out. So yeah, thanks to all of you for coming. That's pretty much the introduction to Eco. And for those of you who would like to support our sponsor, Pink Lifestyle, you can key in the code Love Sugar Spice, and you will get a 15% discount. Yeah, that's right. 15% discount by supporting the our sponsor. They will also be encouraged to continue to support our events, our talks. So Sugar and Spice is unique in that we have Asian presenters, and we talk about topics around sexuality that we don't often talk about. And we are providing this platform for Asians all around the world to talk about what is important when it comes to our sexuality. So, okay, thank you everybody for being here. I'd like to thank our host, Kat, for doing such a great job, and also our presenters, Justin and Alex, who is here, who sat through the whole thing. Yeah, so I really appreciate you taking the time to rehearse and to give us the speech of your life. It was really very inspiring to hear from you and from your perspectives. So really thank you for being here, and I'm sure that the recording will also continue to be out there and support a lot of other people when it comes to their sexuality.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for doing your work too. It's so needed.
Thank you everybody. So I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a wrap. Thank you.
It's a wrap. Thank you, guys.